Hi, it's Bea with Crafting Daily Dose, and today I have a fun alternative using the April 2022 paper pumpkin called Change is Beautiful. In sticking with the theme, our caterpillar is going to go into the chrysalis and is going to emerge as a butterfly. If you'd like to make this interactive card, stick around and I'll show you how. So these are the pieces for the kit. The card base is basic white thick cardstock, and it is 5.5 inches across by 8.5 inches in height, scored down the middle at 4 1/4 inches. This one is the card base from the kit that I'll be using. It's the one that opens up like this. These two die cuts are also from the kit, the caterpillar and the butterfly. And then I've got a piece of regular basic white cardstock. This one is 2 15/16 of an inch, and so it's just a tiny bit less than 3 inches. And then the height is 3 7/8 of an inch, and so it's just a little bit shorter than 4 inches. I've got two little pieces of basic white cardstock here that are going to be the pop-up mechanism for the butterfly. Each one is 3/4 of an inch across by 1/4 of an inch in height, and it's been scored down the middle at 3/8 of an inch. Now I've got some clear pieces here that may be hard for you to see. This one is a piece of window sheet, which is our clear acetate. It is 4.5 inches across by 1/2 of an inch in height, but we're going to end up trimming that down. And then this is a piece of cellophane. It is 2 1/4 inches across by 1.5 inches in height. And if you want to, you can even use the cellophane that was the packaging for the embellishments, which we're also going to use. Now, I don't always mention all of the adhesives, but in this case, we're using two in particular that are important. I'm going to be using Terran tape, which is a roll of double-sided tape. And then I'll also be using these foam adhesive strips, which are pre-cut to 1/8 of an inch in width. Now, if you don't have the foam adhesive strips, you can also use the dimensionals that come with the kit. You can trim off your own little strips here, especially off the sides. That makes it easier because then the pieces don't separate out from one another. These two types of foam are the same thickness, and so it's easy to mix and match them. But obviously this one's going to be faster because it's already cut. Once you've assembled your pieces, then we're ready to start. So the first step is going to be to cut up this card from the kit, and it already comes with these two score lines, and I've gone ahead and folded them just because that helps to make it easier for me to see them. I'm going to line up the score line with the track on my trimmer, and I'll just go ahead and cut it out. So right now we have these two pieces. I'm going to go ahead and set them aside. And now we'll work on this remaining piece. So I am going to score it at 2 3/8 of an inch. So here's 2 3/8. I'm careful to move this darker cutting blade out of the way so that I can just use this lighter scoring blade instead. And I'll score at 2 3/8 of an inch. Next, I'm going to scoot it over to the left, and now I'm paying attention to the measurements that are on the right, and I want to trim off 3/16 of an inch. Now, the 1/16 of an inch mark is actually right here at the intersection between the brown and the white. So this first tick mark that you see is actually 2/16 of an inch, and then the second tick mark is 3/16 of an inch. So that's what we're aiming for. I'm going to go ahead and put that at 3/16. I'm going to move this out of the way, and I'm going to be cutting with this darker blade. So trim off 3/16 of an inch. This is the part that comes off. Okay, and now on this piece, I'm going to turn it so that now the long side is facing this way, and I'm going to trim off 3/16 of an inch. So we find that same mark that we did before. So basically we trimmed it off of the top part, and now we're going to turn it so that we're going to trim the same amount from the bottom part. So placing it again at 3/16 of an inch. And now this piece is ready to use. While the trimmer is out, I'm going to take and score down the middle of this butterfly. So I'm just putting the butterfly body along the track here, and I'm centering it as best as I can. Move that cutting blade out of the way, and I'm going to use the lighter blade to score it right down the middle. And now we'll move on to stamping. I'm going to do some stamping on this piece, and I'll fold it along the score line so that it's easier to see. And I'm folding this as a valley fold, so I'm folding the pieces towards me. I'll reinforce that with my bone folder. Now this is the part that I want to stamp on. Now in the final card, part of this left side stays hidden even when the panel is pulled out. It's about 3/8 of an inch that stay covered up. So I'm taking this little sticky note and I'm going to measure out 3/8 of an inch. I'm just using these little grids here that are on my paper. And each one of these is 1/4 of an inch. So I'm counting off 1.5 blocks. And it doesn't have to be super precise here. And I will go ahead and mark that off, just as a reminder to myself not to stamp in this area. I've chosen to stamp this sentiment, and I'm using Memento Tuxedo black ink. I'm stamping on top of the silicone mat just to give me a little bit of cushion, which I like to have when I'm using clear photopolymer stamps. Next, I'll stamp the decorative element using the Melon Mambo ink from the kit, but I'm going to stamp it off onto some scrap paper first so that the color is not quite as intense. Now notice on this design how there are these little V shapes on the bottom here. We're going to use that to our advantage and stamp it onto this part of the card so that the V's look like little arrows that are going to point to the right to let the recipient know that they should pull on this part of the card. Before I stamp, I'm going to move this little sticky note and put it over here on the side instead. I'm just turning this because it's easier for me to work with it this way. I'm going to put it part way here so that it's going to mask. So I've cleaned off my stamp, and this time I'm going to ink it up in that Memento Tuxedo black ink again. I'm going to line up my stamp so that the edge of this sticky note is going to cover up the little top part there, and I'm just going to get the 2 rows of V's. I'll give you a closer look at that. And now we'll set this piece aside and stamp a little bit on the inside of our card base. I'm stamping those butterfly images in the Melon Mambo ink from the kit. Next, we'll start to assemble everything together, beginning with this butterfly and these 2 little tabs here. So this is that butterfly that I had scored. I'm going to go ahead and fold it. And that's a pretty good fold. I don't think I need to reinforce that. I'm also going to fold these 2 little tabs. Now I'm going to pick one of the tabs and I'll put glue just on one side of the crease. And I'm putting it all the way to the crease and all the way to the edges. And now I'm turning my butterfly upside down, and I'm going to put the tab with the glue on it and glue it down to this left side here, kind of towards the top. So this is what it looks like so far. This side is free, and it's attached to the butterfly over here. Now I'll take the other tab and I'll put glue on one of its sides. Again, all the way to the crease and all the way to the edges. And this time I'm going to take the side with glue on it and I'm going to put it to the right on the butterfly. So it will be like this. And I'm just readjusting these so that if you press them both down, there is one lined up on top of the other. I'll move it so you can see out of the glare. And when you flex it, you can see that each tab has one free edge and one edge that's attached to the butterfly. The butterfly is going to go onto this card panel, and I'm going to aim for here by the clouds because the white from the clouds is going to help camouflage those white tabs. So first I'm going to put some glue on the free end of this lower tab here. I'm going to fold everything in half like this. And I'm going to leave that tab exposed so that I can see what I'm doing here. And I'm going to line it up against this crease so that the middle here is lined up with this middle crease. And I'm going to aim for this tab to be about where the bottom of that cloud is, or close to the bottom. I just need to double check and make sure that the tip of my butterfly wing still fits inside of this card, and it does. Just readjusting it here. Okay, so here's what we have. This top tab is attached to the butterfly, and then the lower tab is attached to the card. Now when we flip this over and look at the other side, we see that the lower tab is attached to the butterfly, and then we've got this free tab here. And now we're going to put some glue on this so that we can attach it to the other side of the card. And I see that mine is a little bit further from the crease than what I want. So I'm just going to scooch it here a little closer to that crease. See what I did? Using glue gives me a little bit of time to maneuver things around until that glue sets. So I'm going to put glue on this free tab up here at the top. And that's just a little bit too much, so I'm just going to take a little piece of scrap cardstock to scrape that off. Then I'm going to fold my card on over on top of that exposed adhesive and give it a moment to set. And now when I open up my card, my butterfly should pop up. And now we're going to turn this panel over and work on the back. I'll take that piece of window sheet and I'll put about 1 inch of tear and tape on it. Just estimating here. I'll put 2 strips so I get a nice firm hold. But I want to check for any excess and cut that off. Okay, now I'm going to attach the top of this window sheet to this panel about 1.5 inches from the bottom. So I'm just going to use this as a guide. 1.5 inches would be 6 of these blocks. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right about there. Peel this off. So here's what it looks like, and that tab is just going to be hanging off the edge right there. Now comes the piece of cellophane, and for that I'm going to be putting some tear and tape both along the top edge and the bottom edge of that piece. Here's my top edge, And now for the bottom. And these are both going on the same side of the cellophane piece. Okay, now I'll remove the backing from just this bottom piece here. And now I'm going to turn it so that that edge is now at the top, and I'm going to line it up with the top edge of my card panel, and I'm going to center it horizontally. I'm just eyeballing it here. It doesn't have to be super exact, but I do want that top edge lined up. So I'll give you a closer look at what that looks like. This part is hanging off here, and now I'm going to flip it up, and I will crease this with my nail, or you can use your bone folder. So from the side, this is what it looks like. The top edge of the cellophane is lined up with the top edge of the card panel, and then it's going to be stuck down here a little bit, extending part of the way, and then it's going to crease and then flip back up. And now, if you feel this, the adhesive is on the top edge of this piece here. And now I'm going to bring in this panel here, the one that has the chrysalis on it, and I want to make sure that both of my panels are right side up so that my words and my images are not upside down. Now I'm going to turn this panel over, and I'm going to wedge it up next to the cellophane as far as it can go. Then I'll check to make sure that my two pieces are centered vertically. So there should be about as much overhang here at the top as there is down at the bottom. And when that is in place, I'm going to get it lined up, trying to make sure that these two edges here are parallel to one another. Then I will go ahead and remove this backing. Now smooth it out and kind of let it fall into place, and just press very, very gently until I can check and make sure that everything is working okay. Now, once you turn it over, it's always a good idea with interactive and pop-up cards to check as you go along to make sure that everything is working smoothly. So the idea is that this part can be pushed back, retracted back, so that it's hidden from view in the beginning. Pull on this, and then that's going to flip open and the butterfly pops up. So everything looks like it's working so far. Now I'm going to retract it back, and I'm going to line up these edges here. I'll put down a little piece of washi tape to hold those edges in place together. And now I'm going to come to the back and use those foam adhesive strips to create a channel for this part to slide in and out. So I'm going to take a piece of this here, and I'll put it along this edge, just making sure that I've got enough clearance, and that looks good so far. I usually try to use spare scissors so that my snips don't get all gummy, but I don't have them on hand at the moment, so I'll just have to clean those off afterwards. And then I'm going to put some on this other edge. Okay, so again, just checking it. That looks good. Now I'm going to put a little bit of the foam adhesive strips along this edge here, just to act as like a stopper so that this doesn't keep going too far. So I don't need very much for that, just a little piece will do. That's probably only about 1/4 inch or so. I'll just use the little scraps here. And once I have those in place, I'm going to push this as far back as it can now go. And I'll check from the front to make sure that things are still hidden. Now, if you have a little bit of an overhang, because that happens sometimes, if something was a little bit off and you've got some of this showing, go ahead and trim it off. Remember, you can pull this out and kind of flip this over like this so that this part can still go into your trimmer if you need to slice off a little bit more. But otherwise, if everything is fitting okay, you can go ahead and put this onto the card base. Here's my card base, and here's that other panel. And I'm just going to quickly flip this open to make sure that I'm not going to be putting things on upside down. So this seems to be the right way, and I'll use Stampin' Seal to adhere this panel onto my card. I'm noticing that I've got just a little bit of overhang down here at the bottom, so I'll put this back in my trimmer and neaten that up a little bit. Okay, all better. And now I'm ready for this contraption. So I'm going to go ahead and take off the backing from the foam adhesive strips that are up here. Just going to do the top first. And I'm lining it up. It's okay to have just a little bit of overlap between this panel and the one that's already down on the card. It's better to have a little bit of overlap than to leave a white gap showing. I'm using my fingers to help make sure that those edges are lined up nicely. And flipping it up just to make sure that this panel hasn't been caught. That's still sliding smoothly, so that's good. And now I'm ready to take off the backing from down here. Testing again to make sure I didn't trap anything and that everything still pops open. That's great. Now, the window tab that we see over here, obviously we're going to end up trimming that down, but it's easier to work with it when it's initially longer than what we need. As you might have guessed, that strip is going to be the ride for our caterpillar. So I'm going to take the caterpillar and I will put a strip of tear and tape along its body, along the long axis of its body right there. And I'll place them down onto the window strip. Using my fingers to check and make sure that there's nothing sticky back there because I don't want anything to get trapped. And once again, we're going to test it out. That looks good. So where he is right now, he disappears just as this panel is about to flip open. So that's a nice effect. But I'm noticing that his head here is maybe raised up a little bit too high because it's creating a little bit of a catch point. So what that tells me is that I need to put a little bit more tear and tape down in there. I've cut a very small piece and I'm just going to put it right in here. That's going to help That's just going to help the head lie down flatter and not create a catch point. So let's test it again. That's nice and smooth now because this head isn't lifted up and catching onto the panel. So that's all done. Now that I'm happy with the caterpillar, I will go ahead and trim off some of this excess here. And then a few of those embellishments. I've got my Wink of Stella, and I just decided I'm going to go ahead and brush some over the chrysalis here because there's oftentimes a nice amount of shimmer on these, and it kind of goes along with the embellishments. Just gives it a little extra touch that's probably doesn't show up well on camera, but it's a really fun effect in person. Now, one final little detail that I like to do is to put a little bit of foam just underneath here so that it's a little bit raised up and easier to pull out. So here's a dimensional foam sticker, and then here's just a little scrap of paper. It's actually the leftovers from one of these grid sheets. So I don't need it to be exact or anything. It doesn't really matter. What I'm going to do then is to go ahead and peel off this other backing, and now I'll flip it over so that the sticky side is facing down on the bottom, and I'm going to tuck it in underneath this panel and right on top of the card. So it's going to look like this. It gives it just a little bit of lift that you can see here when you're looking at the card from the side. That just makes it easier for somebody to be able to grab onto it and enjoy their card. It's completely optional. If you decide to do it, make sure that you put it in far back enough so that it doesn't cause an obstruction when you're trying to close the card, and also make sure that it doesn't get in the way of the caterpillar. So there's our finished card. A couple of butterflies on the inside, and then on the front, our caterpillar disappears into the chrysalis as we start to read our message, and then the butterfly emerges. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you've enjoyed this dose of creativity. If you get a chance to try out the project, I would love to see it. So feel free to share it in my Facebook group or tag me if you're sharing elsewhere. If you're interested in Paper Pumpkin and don't yet have a demonstrator, you can find the subscription link, the supply list, and all my other links in the description box below. I hope to craft with you again next time, and until then, have a great day.